So good morning, everybody. My name is Lorenzo Benini, and I work for the European Environment Agency. What I'm going to present to you is a set of reflections concerning the concept of uncomfortable knowledge and its potential use in the context of a boundary organization like the European Environment Agency. So in particular, I will introduce you briefly to the context of the knowledge paradigm of the European Environment Agency and our activities in relation to that. And I'll provide you an overview of the interactions that occurred between the MAGIC project and the EEA. And I will also introduce which were the outcomes stemming from such interactions, on top of some reflections stemming from those. So who are we at the EEA? Well, basically, the EEA is a European body. It's an agency, so it means that it's not directly at the European Commission, the Parliament, the Council, but it's somehow independent from the Commission directly. And but it works very much in a network with both the Commission and other institutions, but also with a number of European countries which go beyond the 27 members of the European Union. We have a network called the IONET, which is composed overall by nearly 40 countries between cooperating and full members. What we do is basically to support sustainable development in a broad term by providing timely, targeted, relevant and reliable information to policymakers and the public concerning the state and the outlook of the European environment. We are a boundary organization because we work on the interface, say, between science and policy, and also probably other forms of knowledge. And network organization, again, because the way we do our work, which is mainly reporting and data production, indicators production, and things of the sort, depends a lot on the network that I've just described. One of the key products is that we develop, and we do it every 5 years, is called European Environment State and Outlook, SOER. And we recently have published the latest version in the end of 2019, and it was the SOER 2020. This is the main mandate of the agency. And in order to do that, basically integrate different forms of knowledge. We report on the state, trends, and prospects for the environment. And this information is useful and used in the context of policy making, and also in monitoring, when assessing whether the targets and objectives were met, for instance. Moreover, these publications, and this is the sixth publication of the sixth XOER that has been published by the EEA, have both the role of monitoring, as I was mentioning, of the performance in terms of the environment, and also in other aspects of sustainability, but also contribute to shaping and framing some of the policy packages, or at least policy frameworks that are meant to be responding to environmental and sustainability challenges. For instance, the latest SOER was, we could say, influential in defining the concept of European Green Deal and reflecting on a number of issues around production and consumption systems like food, energy, mobility, and so on. So, for instance, in this picture, you can see the launch event of our SOER that was on the 4th of December last year, 2019, and the presence of Vice President Timmermans, and together with other high representative of the European Union and our director. And it was basically the same time frame within which the Commission proposed the European Green Deal and announced the European Green Deal. So it's just important to contextualize the type of activities we do and the link that exists with policy. So the way, let's say, the knowledge and the knowledge paradigm and the framings that the EA works with are highly co-developed, let's say, by such interactions. Yeah, and so, and I come to the second bullet point of my second part of my presentation. So why did the EA, in particular myself and the group I work with, decided to interact with MAGIC, the project? Well, that's common institutional practice in a sense of the EA to keep an eye on EU projects which are of interest for the topics that we deal with. Obviously, depending on scope and time scale. So because of thematic relevance of the topics that the project deals with, so aspects related to energy, food, mobility, and policy frameworks like low carbon economy, circular economy, and so on. But also because of the fact that, let's say, there's an shift, or at least a change in the understanding of some aspects of sustainability challenges at the EEA, which go towards more open and I would say systemic type of understanding of the interactions between different factors like technologies, consumption, and the existence of production and consumption systems, and more recently also on uncertainty and complexity. And so, moreover, one other point of our knowledge paradigm at the EEA, which is the fact that we are shifting on top of the systems part, systemic part, also towards a more solutions-oriented type of knowledge. So what the EA reports about is not just about the environmental challenges or sustainability challenges, but it is also about, or it aims to be also about enabling and empowering in a certain sense concerning the types of so-called solutions or better responses to such challenges. And there's still quite some need to make sense of their reliability of the solutions which are currently proposed out there, and potential risks, but also opportunities. I think the MAGIC project does so to a considerable extent in relation to some of the issues mentioned above. How we interacted was mainly through three type of activities. First, I think at the early onset of the project was mainly through interviews and feedbacks on which policy narratives were the most interesting for some of us to be further explored in the context of the project. And then we had a workshop, organized a workshop together with several of the partners of the MAGIC project, with focus on the resource nexus, so a way of looking at issues in an integrated manner, in a systemic manner, and also on the implications for the policy frameworks that were being developed at that time. Moreover, we had a couple of webinars as follow-ups from these activities on specific areas of interest, including aspects related to agriculture, food production, import, and discussions on related to the common agricultural policy and so on. And here I'm going to provide an overview of the outcomes of such interaction, which I think is useful to reflect because the bottom line is that the MAGIC project brings to the fore some so-called uncomfortable knowledge, some aspects of so-called uncomfortable knowledge, which are basically sometimes not the usual type of outcome or that you get from other European projects, for instance, because they try really to look at the potential critical aspects embedded in some of the narratives which are used in policies, but also to look at the potential challenges associated with the implementation of them. So all of this is useful material for reflection in the context of the EA. But obviously, being exposed to these type of different perspectives creates different types of reactions according to the audience who's in the room, basically. So we had, I would say, we had mixed reactions from my colleagues, ranging from avoidance of the topic at all, so because it didn't raise interest in them. Even resistance to certain statements that were made during the workshop, for instance, particularly on the circular economy, and but also some criticism on the tone. So whether actually the way the messages were conveyed was too pessimistic, according to some, or were not really focusing on the solutions or responses type of actions that are necessary, let's say, or could be necessary. There was some delusion there. On the other hand, other colleagues really appreciated the approach and the issues that, for instance, quantitative storytelling brings to the fore, both from a methodological perspective, but also for the type of critical insights it raises. But all I would say that the use of the knowledge that was put on the table through this project, at least in the occasions that we had for exchanges, was not obvious in the EA context. Sometimes we also considered less mature than more thematic, indicator-based type of reporting, which is something the EA is more familiar with. So there is room for further exploration of how best the outputs could be used in such context. On the other hand, such interactions led to a set of activities from the side of the EA, particularly under the umbrella of the resource nexus, some related contracting, some journal publications, and some uptake in EA products, which I'm going to present in a moment. Moreover, it also led to some spillover, for instance, within the network of countries. I know for sure that at least one country picked up the approach and the issue and established contacts in order to replicate, or at least to support their work on long-term scenarios, also through the quantitative storytelling approach. So for what concerns the uptake in EA products, well, as I was introducing before, so ER, so the State of the Environment and Outlook report, is the most visible EA product, and MAGIC has contributed, or some of the outcomes have contributed to that, so at least they were referenced within the report. I would say that some of the uncomfortable knowledge that MAGIC discusses was actually picked up in the assessment, particularly under the third part of the assessment, which is about understanding sustainability challenges and responses. And also the assessment per se has dedicated sections on the resource nexus, the policy nexus, the issue of silo governance, and so on, which I know are all issues of relevance discussed in the project. Nevertheless, despite these positive uptake, I would say, on a number of issues, they were not really at the well integrated within the main narrative of the assessment, which was still about, and is still about, sustainability, transitions, and solution. Really, the focus was on the solution part, on the possibility of reaching certain goals and objectives and the pathways towards that, rather than integrating more extensively reflections on what could go wrong according to certain developments or according to certain properties. It's just like rebound effects or issues like that. So I think that reflects both the fact that these content were somehow novel for the EEA, so it was not that easy to integrate everything in the first go into a coherent narrative. But on the other hand, it is also a matter of the difficulty of, let's say, using this type of knowledge as the main points for building a narrative. I think the balance between, let's say, illustration and kind of core element of the narrative in terms of uncomfortable knowledge has changed quite a bit in a different product, which I have managed. It's called Drivers of Change of Relevance for Europe's Environment and Sustainability. And there, on top of the most, let's say, technical aspects of uncomfortable knowledge, I think in this case it was possible to bring to the fore more clearly aspects related to uncertainty, complexity, the legitimacy of multiple perspectives, and limits to certain concepts and narratives also within policy. And so overall, the let's say the product reads a little bit more integrated in these terms. So there's more complementarity, say, between the more established bulk of knowledge and the more systemic one, and the more uncomfortable one. But this is not just an accessory; it's structural in the narrative. So let's see what the next EA activities and products will be able to achieve in these terms. And this brings me to the final part of this presentation, which is about I'd like to share a couple of reflections on what it means to work in a boundary organization, and say trying to incorporate or at least reflect on these issues, which is not sometimes an easy task. And so the first point is that the framing of the assessments is often a given. It's not entirely a given, but it's quite substantially given by the policy framework. And this is a structural element, foundational element of the European Environment Agency, as all the other agencies or European bodies, because for such bodies working within a certain framing or with a certain framing ensures legitimacy, salience, and credibility for the organization. They're not the only aspects that ensure this, but this is definitely the key elements which distinguishes these institutions, I would say. On the other hand, the understanding of issues and therefore, so in terms of environment and sustainability, changes over time, changes over sometimes long time scales, but it does change, and the framing change accordingly, in many cases. I think it reflects a process of digestion and acceptance at the, let's say, science, policy, society interface, which it might go with very different speeds for a certain period of time. And so it might not be necessarily aligned within all of these, across, let's say, these components of the interface, in a sense. But things do change.